Your child hears you. That is not the problem. They just do not respond. At least, not right away. You ask them to clean up. They keep playing. You remind them. They move slowly. You raise your voice. They react. And for a moment, it feels like discipline worked. But look closer. What actually worked was pressure. And pressure always comes at a cost. Because every time a child waits for pressure before acting, something is being trained. Not discipline. Delay. Not responsibility. Escalation. This moment feels small, ordinary, forgettable. But moments like this shape behavior for years. Stay with me. Because once you understand what children are actually learning in these interactions, discipline stops feeling like a battle of wills. It becomes a design problem. And design problems have solutions. Let us begin with the distinction most parents never hear. Obedience and self-discipline are not the same thing. They are often confused, but they are built in completely different ways. Obedience is external. It depends on reminders, supervision, and consequences. It works when authority is present. Self-discipline is internal. It works even when no one is watching. It is the ability to notice what needs to be done and act without pressure. Most Western parenting strategies focus on obedience, clear instructions, frequent reminders, escalating consequences. And they work. Until they don't. Because the moment pressure disappears, behavior collapses. Not because the child is unmotivated, but because self-discipline was never practiced. Now here is the uncomfortable truth. You cannot teach self-discipline by regulating your child for them. In the same way, you cannot build strength by carrying someone else's weight. The muscle only grows when it is used, and self-discipline is a muscle. This is where Japanese parenting looks radically different. Not stricter, not colder, more patient. In Japan, adults intervene less. They speak less. They repeat themselves less. Not because they expect perfection, but because they understand how regulation is built, through experience, not instruction. There is a Japanese concept often translated as teaching the body. It means learning through doing, not being told. Through repetition, not explanation. Through structure, not force. This is discipline as embodiment, not enforcement. Now pause for a moment. Think about how often your child actually practices self-regulation. Not reacting to you, not responding to reminders, but independently noticing a task and completing it. For many children, the answer is rarely, because adults step in too fast. Now let us talk about the brain. Self-discipline lives in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, planning, and emotional regulation. This part of the brain shuts down under stress. Yelling, threats, counting, and pressure all activate the stress response. Which means every time you escalate to get compliance, you are turning off the very system you want to strengthen. The child may comply, but no learning happens. Now consider the opposite, when the adult stays calm, when the environment is predictable, when the child is allowed to notice a problem and solve it. The prefrontal cortex stays online. Learning happens. This is why Japanese classrooms look so different. teachers speak quietly. They do not repeat instructions endlessly. They wait. A child forgets supplies. The teacher notices, says nothing. The child pauses, realizes, finds a solution. That lesson sticks, not because of punishment, not because of praise, because the child owned it. Now let us talk about routines. Routines are not about control. They are about architecture. When daily sequences repeat, the brain stops expending energy on decision-making. Behavior becomes automatic, self-initiated, no reminders required. This is why Japanese children appear disciplined. Not because they are forced, because the routine carries the behavior. Now contrast this with many Western homes. Children receive a stream of verbal instructions. Brush your teeth, get dressed, pack your bag. Each instruction requires effort. Each one invites resistance. The brain stays reactive. Now imagine a different system. A visible morning routine. Same sequence, same order, every day. No narration, no reminders. The routine becomes the cue. And once behavior is cued, discipline emerges naturally. Now let us talk about responsibility. Not chores as punishment, real contribution. In Japan, children carry their own belongings. They clean shared spaces. They serve meals. Not to enforce obedience, to build competence. Competence is the fuel of discipline. When children feel capable and needed, they rise. When they feel managed, they wait. Now let us talk about calm, because this is the part most parents underestimate. Regulation is contagious. Your nervous system sets the tone. When you escalate, your child escalates. When you stay calm, your child borrows that calm. This is not philosophy, it is neuroscience. Children mirror adult regulation automatically. Now let us talk about waiting, the hardest skill for parents. Watching a child struggle without intervening. This is where discipline is actually built. When you wait, the child's brain searches. When you rescue, the search stops. Search is learning. Rescue is interruption. Now let us bring this together. Discipline is not created through commands. It is cultivated through structure, responsibility, modeling, and restraint. And restraint is the hardest part, because it requires the adult to regulate themselves first. This is not easy, but it works. And this is only the foundation, because once self-discipline begins to form, everything else changes. Once you stop confusing obedience with self-discipline, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The more parents remind, the less children initiate. The more parents escalate, the longer children wait. The more pressure enters the system, the weaker internal control becomes. This is not defiance, it is conditioning. Now let us talk about reminders, because this is where most well-intentioned parents unknowingly sabotage self-discipline. A reminder feels responsible. Did you brush your teeth? Don't forget your homework. Clean up your room. Each reminder sends a quiet message. You don't need to notice this yourself. Over time, the brain adapts. It stops scanning the environment. It stops anticipating. It waits. Waiting becomes the safest strategy, and initiative disappears. This is why children who are constantly reminded often appear unmotivated later. not because they lack character, because the system trained them to be passive. Now compare this with the Japanese approach. Adults reduce verbal input. They design environments that cue behavior without words. Shoes are placed near the door. Bags have assigned locations. Schedules are visible. The environment becomes the reminder. This matters because behavior follows cues, not intentions. When the cue is external and consistent, the brain conserves energy. Discipline becomes automatic. Now let us talk about friction. Friction is anything that makes starting harder. Clutter increases friction. Disorganization increases friction. Ambiguity increases friction. The more friction, the more willpower is required. Willpower is limited. Systems are not. Japanese homes and classrooms reduce friction deliberately. Not for aesthetics, for behavior. When starting is easy, discipline emerges naturally. Now let us talk about consequences. Not punishment, consequences. Japanese discipline relies heavily on natural consequences. A child forgets their notebook. They experience inconvenience. No lecture, no emotional reaction. The lesson belongs to the child. This ownership is critical. When parents add emotion, the lesson shifts. The child focuses on the parent's reaction, not their own action. This is why calm responses teach more than intense ones. Now let us talk about timing. Learning only happens when the nervous system is regulated. If a child is stressed, embarrassed, or overwhelmed, feedback is rejected. Japanese adults often wait. They correct later, or not at all. Because not every mistake needs commentary. Silence allows integration. Now let us talk about shame. Shame shuts down learning. Japanese discipline avoids shaming language. Mistakes are treated as part of the process, not as flaws. This preserves dignity. Dignity supports regulation. Now let us talk about effort. In Japanese culture, effort is praised more than outcome. You stayed focused. You didn't give up. You finished what you started. This reinforces persistence. Persistence is the engine of self-discipline. Now let us talk about repetition. Self-discipline is not taught once. It is built through repetition. Same routines, same expectations, same calm responses. Children adapt to what is stable. They test what is inconsistent. Now let us talk about the parent's real job. The parent is not there to control behavior. The parent is there to protect the system, protect routines, protect structure, protect calm. When the system holds, behavior improves. When the system breaks, behavior collapses. Now let us talk about escalation. Escalation feels effective. It produces immediate compliance, but it teaches the wrong lesson. It teaches that calm instructions are optional. Only intensity matters. Children learn to wait for emotion. This trains resistance. Japanese discipline avoids escalation deliberately. Adults keep tone flat, predictable, consistent. This predictability builds trust. Trust builds cooperation. Now let us talk about cooperation. Cooperation is not submission. It is alignment. Children cooperate when expectations are clear and dignity is preserved. Structure without respect creates rebellion. Respect without structure creates chaos. Japanese parenting balances both. Now let us talk about autonomy again. Children are given real responsibility early, not because adults expect perfection, but because responsibility builds competence. Competence builds confidence. Confidence supports discipline. This chain cannot be skipped. Now let us zoom out. What Japanese parents are really teaching is identity. I am someone who notices. I am someone who contributes. I am someone who manages myself. Identity is not taught. It is formed through experience. Now let us talk about the hardest shift for Western parents. Doing less, saying less, waiting more. This feels risky. Silence feels like failure. But silence is where learning happens. Now let us talk about mistakes again. Children will forget. They will fail. They will struggle. This is not proof the system is broken. It is proof the system is working. Struggle precedes mastery. Now let us bring this back to discipline. Self-discipline is not compliance under pressure. It is regulation under freedom. That freedom is earned through structure, and structure is maintained through adult restraint. Now let us prepare to go deeper. Because once self-discipline begins to form, it reshapes confidence, leadership, and long-term resilience. And that is where the real return appears. When self-discipline begins to form, it rarely announces itself. There is no moment where a parent suddenly says, "It worked." Instead, there is a quiet change in rhythm. Children start moving earlier. They initiate without being asked. They notice small things before they become problems. And most importantly, they recover faster when they make mistakes. This is where the Japanese discipline system reveals its long-term advantage. It does not optimize for short-term compliance. It optimizes for long-term reliability. Now let us talk about reliability, because this is the trait that changes everything later in life. Reliable people are trusted. Trusted people are given responsibility. Responsibility accelerates growth. This sequence begins in childhood, and freedom, when paired with structure. And freedom, when paired with structure, accelerates maturity. Now let us connect self-discipline to confidence. Confidence is often misunderstood. It is not loudness. It is not dominance. It is quiet certainty, the belief that I can handle what comes next. This belief is built through experience. Every time a child notices a task and completes it without pressure, confidence grows. Every time they fix a mistake without being rescued, confidence compounds. This is why overmanaged children often appear anxious later. They never collected enough evidence that they could handle things on their own. Now let us talk about adolescence. This is where most parenting strategies break. Teenagers push for autonomy. Parents tighten control. Conflict escalates. But in families where self-discipline was built early, adolescence looks different. Not perfect, but more stable. Teenagers still test limits, but they do not need to burn everything down to feel independent, because autonomy was never withheld. It was practiced. Now let us talk about authority again. Authority that relied on escalation early collapses later. Authority that relied on structure holds. Japanese parents do not suddenly become strict during adolescence. They do not need to. The system is already internalized. Teenagers know what is expected. They know how to manage themselves. Disagreements still happen, but they are contained. Now let us talk about effort. In many Western households, effort is negotiated. Try harder. Focus. You need to care more. In Japanese culture, effort is assumed. Struggle is normal. Difficulty is expected. This removes drama. When struggle is normalized, children persist. When struggle is treated as a problem, children avoid. Avoidance destroys discipline. Now let us talk about school environments. Children who practiced self-discipline at home adapt faster. They manage materials. They follow routines. They recover from setbacks without emotional collapse. Teachers notice this quickly, and when teachers trust a child, opportunities follow. Now let us talk about leadership. Leadership is not about controlling others. It is about controlling oneself. People who cannot regulate themselves cannot lead. Children who learn self-discipline early stand out later, not because they demand attention, because they are dependable. Now let us connect this to long-term thinking. Self-discipline is compound interest. Each small act of regulation builds capacity. Over years, the difference becomes massive. Two children may look similar at age 5. By age 15, the gap is obvious. Not in intelligence, in self-management. Now let us talk about the parent's experience again. This approach requires letting go of the illusion of control. You stop managing behavior moment by moment. You manage the environment. You protect routines. You remain calm. This feels uncomfortable at first, because control feels active. But systems are stronger than force. Now let us talk about sustainability. Parenting through pressure burns parents out. Parenting through structure conserves energy. This is why Japanese parents often appear calmer, not because their children are easier, because the system does the work. Now let us talk about emotional safety. Children raised without constant correction feel safer. Safety allows honesty. Honesty allows growth. Fear shuts everything down. Now let us talk about mistakes again. Mistakes are not interruptions. They are training. Children who are allowed to experience consequences without shame develop resilience. Resilience is the backbone of self-discipline. Now let us bring this together. Self-discipline creates confidence. Confidence creates trust. Trust creates opportunity. Opportunity shapes identity. And identity drives behavior for life. This is not motivational language, it is system design. Now let us prepare to close this, because the final shift is not about children at all. It is about how adults redefine success in parenting. At some point, discipline stops being something you do to a child. It becomes something the child does for themselves. And that is the quiet line where parenting shifts from control to leadership. Because the real goal was never obedience. It was self-management. Now let us be clear about what this approach actually produces. It does not create perfect children. It does not eliminate mistakes. It does not prevent struggle. What it creates is recovery. The ability to notice when something went wrong and respond without collapsing. That ability matters more than any rule. Now let us talk about the parent's internal shift. Parents who adopt this system stop measuring success by immediate compliance. They stop asking, "Did my child listen right away?" and start asking, "Is my child learning to manage themselves?" This changes everything. You become less reactive, less emotional, more strategic. You stop repeating yourself. You stop escalating to be heard. You protect the system instead of chasing behavior. And the system begins to work for you. Now, let us talk about control one final time. Control feels powerful, but it is fragile. The moment you are not present, it disappears. Self-discipline is durable. It travels with the child, into school, into friendships, into work, into adulthood. This is the long-term return. Now let us talk about trust. Trust is not permissiveness. Trust is confidence in a structure. Confidence that if routines are clear and expectations are stable, the child will regulate. Hunger regulates appetite. Routine regulates behavior. Responsibility regulates effort. Adults do not need to force outcomes. They need to design conditions. Now let us address a fear many parents never say out loud. What if I'm doing too little? You are not doing less. You are doing something harder. You are tolerating uncertainty. You are resisting the urge to intervene. You are allowing learning to happen without controlling it. That is not passive parenting. It is disciplined restraint. Now let us zoom out to the long horizon. Parenting is not about winning today. It is about shaping capacity for decades. The child who learns self-discipline early will still make mistakes, but they will recover faster. They will adapt. They will not wait to be rescued. Recovery is the real skill. Now pause for a moment. If this video changed how you think about discipline, obedience, or control, subscribe to this channel. Not for algorithms, but because these conversations are rare, and they matter. And if there is one person in your life, a partner, a friend, a sibling, someone you genuinely care about and want to build a better relationship with their child, share this video with them. Not to criticize, not to correct, but to support. Because parenting, like leadership, is not meant to be done alone. Now let us bring this home. You are not raising a child who follows orders. You are raising a human who can manage themselves, who notices what needs to be done, who acts without pressure, who stays regulated when no one is watching. That is not built through reminders. It is built through structure, through calm, through patience, through restraint. The Japanese discipline system is not about being stricter. It is about being wiser. It replaces force with design, noise with quiet consistency, obedience with self-control. And once that shift happens, discipline stops being a battle. It becomes a byproduct, a quiet one, but a lasting one. Because self-discipline, once built, does not need to be enforced. It carries itself for a lifetime.